In the depths of night, when the world grows quiet and our defenses lower, we become aware of things we can't explain. Footsteps in empty hallways, whispers from darkened corners, shadows that move against the light. These are stories from the edge of sleep, where reality blurs and the impossible becomes real. Tonight, we explore 11 encounters that challenge our understanding of what lies beyond the veil. Experiences that remind us that sometimes the line between our world and the next is thinner than we think. Our first story begins with a warning. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. I've been playing with spirit boards since 8th grade, drawn to their mysterious allure despite the warnings. But it wasn't until the board began refusing to speak, moving straight to goodbye at every attempt, that she realized something else had begun speaking instead. Attacks always began the same way. As sleep approached, Sarah would feel her consciousness becoming trapped, aware but unable to move. Then came the sensations. Her arms being wrenched behind her back, her feet pulled by unseen hands. When they came, carried a violence that felt more like memory than nightmare. She would spiral endlessly downward, losing control, feeling phantom hands yanking at her teeth until she fought her way to consciousness. Every awakening a battle that left her gasping and drained. With her birth mother that changed everything. The woman sat across from Sarah, crafting spirit boards from wooden planks, painting them with seemingly random scribbles and letters until the surface was a maze of potential messages. She would mark the edges with chalk and summon. Something. I read it as I see it, she would say, as objects around her house mysteriously shifted positions when she wasn't looking. The revelation that her birth mother had been playing with spirits since childhood, even battling demons, felt less like coincidence and more like inheritance. Had Sarah unknowingly opened herself to something that had been waiting for generations? The haunting intensified. Alone in her house, she would hear the desk chair in the next room scraping back and forth, accompanied by heavy sighs from the darkness. The doorway to that room remained open, a rectangle of deeper shadow that seemed to watch her pass. Came the night that changed everything. Sarah woke to find herself screaming, "No!" 3 times in rapid succession, each awakening marked by a different terror. First, the sensation of something sitting on her, shaking her entire body. Second, the feeling of being dragged from her bed, her legs kicking against invisible hands. The third time, she woke to find a pillow hovering before her face, a pillow she knew hadn't been there when she fell asleep. The spirit board still sits in her closet today, silent but not forgotten. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, Sarah swears she can hear it whispering, reminding her of a truth she learned too late. Playing with the other side isn't just a game, and there's no going back once you start. After all, once you've opened that door, is there any way to truly close it again? Demons might be what we fear in our waking hours, but there's something more unsettling about the quiet visitors who come in the night. Those patient watchers who stand in darkened corners, waiting for us to notice them. Our next story reminds us that sometimes the most persistent hauntings aren't meant to harm us at all. They're trying to tell us something we need to know. They say children see what adults have forgotten how to see. Their minds, still open to the impossible, haven't yet learned to ignore the shadows at the edge of vision. But what happens when those childhood visitors refuse to be forgotten? Never told her parents about the woman in white who visited her bedroom. At age 7, she assumed everyone had a nighttime visitor who would stand in the corner, watching. The figure appeared like a photograph negative, darker where it should be light, brighter where it should be shadow. Only the eyes remained consistently dark, two void-like spots that seemed to absorb the dim light of her nightlight. Visits always followed the same pattern. Emma would wake around 3 a.m. to find the woman already there, standing motionless in the corner. She never approached the bed, never spoke, just watched. Sometimes, Emma would pull her blanket over her head, counting slowly to 100. When she peeked out again, the woman would be gone, leaving only the lingering scent of something sweet and ancient, like dried flowers pressed between the pages of a forgotten book. As Emma grew older, the visits became less frequent but more intense. The woman began to move, taking small steps toward the bed before vanishing. The sweet scent grew stronger, sometimes accompanied by the sound of soft humming, a melody Emma could never quite remember when morning came. Came the night of her 16th birthday. Emma woke to find not just the woman, but a young girl standing beside her, both figures glowing with that same inverse light. The girl couldn't have been more than 8, wearing what looked like a dress from another century. As Emma watched, frozen between fear and fascination, the girl raised her hand and pointed to the closet. Emma's mother mentioned offhandedly that she'd found an old box while cleaning. It contained photographs of Emma's great-grandmother and her younger sister, who had died of influenza in 1918. When Emma saw the photos, her blood ran cold. The little girl in the faded sepia print wore the same dress she'd seen the night before. Objects would move in Emma's room, small things at first, like jewelry or books, always relocated to form arrow-like patterns pointing toward the closet. The sweet scent grew overwhelming, and the humming became clearer, resolving into a lullaby Emma's grandmother used to sing. Behind a loose baseboard in the closet, she found a small leather-bound diary belonging to her great-grandmother's sister. The final entry, written in a child's unsteady hand, spoke of a secret she needed to share, something about the circumstances of her death that had never been revealed. Emma keeps the diary on her bedside table, though she's never shared its contents with anyone. Some family secrets, she believes, are meant to stay between the living and the dead. But on certain nights, usually around 3 a.m., she still wakes to that familiar sweet scent and the soft sound of a long-forgotten lullaby. Perhaps our ancestors never truly leave us. They simply wait in the shadows until we're ready to understand their messages. Secrets have a way of echoing through generations. But what about the secrets held within the very walls of our homes? Places where tragedy has left its mark so deeply that time itself seems to fold and bend around the memory. Our next tale explores what happens when a house remembers too much, and when the price of inheritance becomes far steeper than anyone could have imagined. Victorian Michael's family for 4 generations. As a child, he'd spent summers there with his grandmother, learning to avoid the creaking 3rd step on the main staircase and the way the afternoon sun cast strange shadows through the stained glass windows. But it wasn't until his grandmother's passing, when he inherited the property at age 28, that he began to understand why she'd always insisted on keeping certain doors locked. Started during the renovation. Michael had been adamant about preserving the house's character while updating its aging infrastructure. The workers were removing old wallpaper from the master bedroom when they discovered it, layers upon layers of paper, each revealing a different era of the home's history. But it was the final layer, pressed directly against the plaster, that made the workers refuse to continue. The pattern seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, forming what looked like faces in various states of distress. And beneath it, scratched directly into the plaster, were words in his grandmother's handwriting. They never left. They're in the walls. Alone in the house, Michael heard it for the first time. The sound of children laughing, echoing from somewhere upstairs. He followed the sound to a small room his grandmother had always used for storage. The laughter stopped abruptly as he approached, replaced by the distinct sound of someone humming a lullaby. Research into the house's history revealed a tragedy Michael's family had never discussed. In 1923, 3 children had perished in a fire that started in that very room. The children of his great-grandfather's first wife, who reportedly went mad with grief and spent her final years confined to the master bedroom, endlessly stripping and replacing wallpaper. Infestations escalated quickly after that discovery. Objects would move on their own, always in sets of 3. Children's footprints would appear in the dust, leading nowhere. The sound of a music box would wake Michael at exactly 3:17 a.m., the time the fire had started, according to old newspaper reports. It was the wallpaper that troubled him most. No matter how many times he replaced it, the old pattern would bleed through, faces emerging from beneath fresh paint and paper. Sometimes he'd catch movement in the corner of his eye, only to turn and see small handprints pressing outward from behind the wall, as if something was trying to break through. The breaking point came when he found his grandmother's diary hidden in the attic. The final entries spoke of a bargain she'd made with whatever lived in the house, a promise to protect and preserve the property in exchange for keeping its secrets. She'd maintained that bargain for 50 years, but now the responsibility had passed to Michael. Michael still lives in the house, though he's learned to coexist with its other residents. He's converted the storage room into a playroom, filled with vintage toys and a working music box. Sometimes, late at night, he'll hear children's laughter mixing with the sound of his grandmother humming that familiar lullaby. Faces in the wallpaper are still there, but they seem less distressed now, almost peaceful. After all, some inheritances come with obligations that go beyond mere property maintenance. And sometimes, the true cost of breaking a promise that spans generations is too terrible to contemplate. I often think of hauntings as relics of the past. Old houses, ancient artifacts, forgotten graves. But in our modern world of screens and digital connections, something else has learned to reach through the static. Our next story reminds us that in the dark hours of the night, even our technology can become a doorway to something beyond understanding. started exactly 1 week after Rachel moved into her new apartment. At first, she dismissed it as pipes settling or mice in the walls, normal sounds for an old building. But mice don't scratch in patterns, and they certainly don't scratch in threes. Always began at midnight. 3 distinct scratches, followed by silence, then 3 more. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the walls themselves were trying to communicate. Rachel started recording the sounds on her phone, hoping to pinpoint their source. But when she played back the recordings, she heard something else entirely. A low, rhythmic humming beneath the scratches, almost like chanting. Sleep suffered first. The scratching would wake her at precisely midnight, then again at 3 a.m. When she did manage to sleep, her dreams were filled with shadowy figures that moved like broken puppets, their joints bending in impossible ways. They never spoke, just watched her with eyes that reflected light that wasn't there. Marks appeared next. Every morning, she'd find 3 parallel lines scratched into different surfaces: her wooden table, her bathroom mirror, even her headboard. She started photographing them, noticing how they seemed to point toward her bedroom closet. But the strangest part? In every photo, the scratches appeared to glow faintly, creating a pattern she couldn't quite decipher. Carl's breaking point came during a video call with her sister. As she described the scratching, her sister's face froze on screen. But while the video stopped, the audio continued. "Rachel," her sister's voice came through, distorted and strange. "There's something behind you." The call dropped immediately. She spun around. She saw it, a dark mass in the corner of her room, roughly human-shaped, but wrong somehow, like a shadow that had forgotten how to lie flat. It moved in stops and starts, like frames missing from a film. As she watched, paralyzed, 3 long fingers extended from its form, dragging across her wall with a sound she'd grown to dread. Rachel finally opened her closet. Behind her hanging clothes, the wall was covered in scratches, hundreds of sets of 3, forming an intricate spiral pattern that seemed to pulse in the darkness. At its center was a handprint, much larger than any human hand, pressed into the plaster as if something had tried to push through from the other side. The manager later told her that the previous tenant had been found in that closet, muttering about the pattern and the message. They'd assumed she'd had a mental breakdown, but among her possessions, they'd found dozens of notebooks filled with the same 3-line pattern Rachel now saw on her walls, along with a single repeated phrase: "They're trying to show us something." Rachel sits in her living room each night, surrounded by recordings she's afraid to play and photographs she can barely look at. The scratching continues, but it's different now, more urgent, more purposeful. Sometimes, in the moments between scratches, she thinks she can almost understand the pattern, almost grasp what they're trying to tell her. When something reaches out from the darkness to show you a truth you were never meant to see, is it more dangerous to look away? Or to finally understand? We teach our children to be wary of strangers. But what about the ones that come to them through mirrors and reflections? Those patient visitors who wait in silvered glass, wearing familiar faces that aren't quite right? Our next story reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous friends are the ones who look just like us. He was 4 years old when when she first mentioned her friend in the mirror. Her mother, Amanda, initially dismissed it as typical imaginary friend behavior. After all, what child hasn't crafted companions from their imagination? But most imaginary friends don't leave wet footprints on the bathroom floor. Innocently enough, Lily would giggle and wave at her reflection, holding lengthy conversations with someone she called the other Lily. Amanda would sometimes catch her daughter pressing her tiny palm against the mirror's surface, as if trying to reach through to the other side. What troubled her was how the handprint would remain on the glass, frost-like and glistening, long after Lily had left the room. Changes in Lily were subtle at first. She started wearing her hair differently, claiming the other Lily showed her how. She began humming unfamiliar melodies that made Amanda's skin crawl. Old lullabies, she would later learn, that hadn't been sung in over a century. But it was the drawings that finally set off real alarm bells. His artwork transformed from typical childhood scribbles to intricate patterns that seemed impossible for her small hands to create. They always featured two girls, one light, one dark, standing before what looked like a doorway made of mirrors. The dark figure's eyes were always drawn as empty circles, colored in with whatever black crayon Lily could find. At night, Amanda heard splashing from the bathroom at 3 a.m. She found Lily sitting cross-legged before the mirror, carrying on an animated conversation with her reflection. Except when Amanda looked closer, she realized with horror that Lily's reflection wasn't quite matching her movements. It was a fraction of a second too slow, like a video falling out of sync. That same night, after finally getting Lily back to bed, Amanda returned to the bathroom to find a message written in the condensation on the mirror. "She's lonely too." The handwriting looked disturbingly like her daughter's, but older somehow, more refined. Their home's history revealed a tragedy that made Amanda's blood run cold. In 1902, a young girl named Lillian had died in that very house. She had been found in the bathroom, apparently trying to reach her friend in the mirror. The original mirror, Amanda discovered with growing dread, was the same one that now hung on their bathroom wall. The situation reached its breaking point when Amanda woke one night to find Lily's bed empty. Following the sound of childish giggles, she rushed to the bathroom, only to find her daughter pressing both hands against the mirror's surface. The glass had become liquid-like, rippling under Lily's touch, and behind her reflection stood another figure, a girl in Victorian dress, with dark, hollow eyes and an outstretched hand. Amanda managed to pull Lily away, just as the mirror's surface began to solidify again. As it hardened, she swears she heard a child's voice whisper, "Next time." They moved out the next day, leaving the mirror behind. But sometimes, catching glimpses of her daughter in reflective surfaces, Amanda notices how Lily's movements don't quite sync with her reflection anymore. And late at night, she still hears her daughter having conversations with someone just out of sight, their whispered voices echoing with the same question. When is a reflection not just a reflection? Sometimes the most haunting memories aren't of supernatural encounters, but of the ordinary moments that suddenly turn extraordinary. The everyday places that become portals to something else. Our next story reminds us that childhood memories, even the sweetest ones, can hide the darkest secrets. The earliest memories of the house house on Cherry Hill Street are filled with sunlight and laughter. I was 6 when we moved there, and at first, everything seemed perfect. The sprawling Victorian had a tire swing in the backyard, window seats perfect for reading, and what felt like endless rooms to explore. But it was the basement that changed everything. Mom had always warned me to stay away from the basement door. "It's not safe down there," she'd say, but never explained why. I remember pressing my ear against that door, listening to what sounded like children playing, their laughter echoing up the stairs, along with the soft bounce of what I assumed was a ball. The time I saw them was during a game of hide and seek with the neighbors' kids. I'd run to the basement door, thinking I'd found the perfect hiding spot. But when I opened it, the stairs weren't leading down. They went up into a sunlit playroom I'd never seen before. 3 children were there, playing with toys that looked ancient but somehow brand new. They invited me to play, and I did. Time moved differently in that room. What felt like minutes would turn out to be hours. The children never aged, never changed their clothes, and always seemed to know when I was coming. They told me stories about the house, about other children who had lived there, played there, and sometimes stayed there. I started noticing changes. I'd return from the basement with toys they'd never bought me, speaking about games they'd never heard of. Sometimes I'd hum lullabies in languages I couldn't possibly know. But most disturbing were the photographs. Family photos, where I appeared in 2 places at once, or where my face seemed slightly different, as if someone else was wearing it. It came in pieces. Newspaper clippings from the 1950s about 3 children who vanished from the house. Reports of other families whose children spoke of mysterious playmates, of a room that shouldn't exist, of games that never ended. Each family had moved away quickly, leaving only stories and those strange, doubled photographs behind. The last time I saw them was the day we moved out. I'd gone to say goodbye, but something was different. The room felt colder, and the children's faces seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Stay and play," they said, but their voices had changed. Deeper, older, hungry. I ran, and as I slammed the basement door, I heard them calling my name in voices that weren't children's voices at all. Later, I drove past the old house. A new family had moved in, with children. Through the basement window, I caught a glimpse of movement, heard the echo of familiar laughter, and for a moment, in the reflection of the glass, I saw them. 3 children playing with a 4th, all of them turning to wave at me with smiles that stretched too wide. Sometimes I wonder about that playroom, about those children who never grow old. I wonder if somewhere in that house, in a room that exists between reality and memory, a version of me is still there, playing endless games with friends who wear borrowed faces. And I wonder, when the new children disappear, if anyone will remember to check the family photographs, to see if perhaps they appear twice, one version slightly wrong, as if someone else is wearing their face. The worst part isn't the following or the watching. It's knowing that it's waiting for something. Every night, Sarah checks the videos on her phone, dreading the moment she'll find another one she didn't take. She knows that someday she'll see that hand reaching for her again, And this time, it won't stop short of touching her face. Say, if you visit that antique store now, you might see a photograph of a young woman who looks like Sarah. In it, she's looking over her shoulder at something just out of frame, her expression frozen in a moment of recognition. If you look closely at her shadow on the wall behind her, you might notice it doesn't match her pose. Instead, it shows a figure reaching out, as if to finally make contact. Sometimes the most terrifying hauntings aren't from external forces, but from the pieces of ourselves we've tried to forget. The choices we've made, the paths not taken, the lives we could have lived. Our next story reminds us that our greatest fears might be hiding in the most familiar place of all, our own reflection. I first noticed the changes in my morning routine. Small things at first. A coffee cup I didn't remember filling, a newspaper open to pages I hadn't read. Then I found a journal on my desk, written in my handwriting, describing a life I hadn't lived, a life where I'd made different choices. The entries started from that pivotal moment 15 years ago, when I'd chosen my career over love. But in these pages, I'd chosen differently. I married her, had children, built a life filled with the simple joys I'd sacrificed for success. The details were vivid. Our first house, our daughter's first steps, family vacations I'd never taken. At first, I thought I was writing these entries in my sleep. But then I started seeing him, the other me. Glimpses at first, in windows and mirrors, wearing clothes I didn't own. He looked happier, more alive somehow. And sometimes, when I caught his reflection, he would stop and look back at me, his expression filled with something between pity and contempt. Boundaries between our lives began to blur. I'd find traces of his existence in my apartment, family photos I hadn't taken, children's toys that disappeared when I looked directly at them. Neighbors started asking about my family, confused when I insisted I lived alone. "But we just saw you with your wife and kids yesterday," they'd say, "all of you looking so happy." Journal entries continued, but now they were addressing me directly. "Why did you choose wrong?" they asked. "Why did you let fear win?" Each entry felt like an accusation. Each happy memory he described was a reminder of what I'd lost, or perhaps what I'd thrown away. One night, I stayed up to catch him writing. At midnight, I watched as my reflection in the bedroom mirror began moving independently. Sitting at a desk I didn't own, writing in a journal identical to mine. When he noticed me watching, he smiled, not unkindly, but with a sadness that felt like judgment. "You can still change it," he wrote that night. "Time isn't as linear as you think, but the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to cross back." The words appeared in my journal as I watched him write them, his pen and mine moving in perfect synchronization. I started following his life more closely through the journal entries. I learned about his daughter's love for painting, his son's first words, the way he and my old love had grown together instead of apart. Each entry was a window into a life that could have been mine, that, perhaps, in some other reality, still was. Then the entries began to change. They spoke of decisions, of moments when reality bends, of choices that echo across multiple lives. "We're not the only versions," he wrote. "There are others, some better, some worse. All of us watching each other, wondering about the roads not taken. Last night, I saw him clearly for the first time, not in a reflection or a dream, but standing in my room. Behind him, through what looked like a tear in the air itself, I could see his life, our life, playing out in full color and sound. He held out his hand, an invitation or a warning. I couldn't tell which. I didn't take his hand. Not yet. But the journal keeps filling with entries. And sometimes, now I write back. We're having a conversation across realities, between the life I chose and the life I could have had. Lately, I've noticed something that terrifies me more than any ghost story. My reflection doesn't always match my movements anymore, as if it's preparing to make a choice of its own. The journal sits open on my desk as I write this, its pages filling with words from both of us. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself wondering if I close my eyes and wish hard enough, if I choose differently this time, which version of me will be writing these words tomorrow? Our bodies often react to fear before our minds can process it. A racing heart, sweating palms, the urge to run. What happens when terror manifests in ways we can't control? When our own hands become instruments of our deepest fears? Our next story shows us that sometimes the most horrifying transformations begin with a simple pull. It started with an itch, just a small irritation above my right eye. I scratched it absently while looking in the bathroom mirror, and a single eyebrow hair came loose. Nothing unusual, except for what I saw in its place. Where the hair had been, there was a tiny black dot. Not a follicle, but something that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. I leaned closer to the mirror, and that's when I saw it blink. The compulsion was immediate and overwhelming. My fingers moved to my eyebrows, and I started pulling. One hair, then another, then dozens. Each removed hair revealed another dot. Another tiny eye, each one blinking independently of the others. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. My roommate found me hours later, the bathroom floor covered in eyebrow hairs, my face bleeding from where I'd scratched too deep. When she looked at me, she didn't scream. She didn't even seem to notice the dozens of tiny eyes now visible where my eyebrows had been. She just helped me clean up and suggested I see a therapist about stress-induced trichotillomania. The therapist didn't see the eyes either. No one did. But I could feel them watching all the time. I saw everything, not just what was in front of my face, but things happening behind me, above me, even through walls. Images would flash in my mind. My neighbors in their apartments, people in the street below, scenes from places I'd never been. Eyes began communicating with each other. I could hear them late at night, whispering in a language that sounded like static and clicking sounds. They were sharing what they saw, building a network of vision that stretched far beyond my understanding, and they were growing hungry for more. I started wearing bangs, then a full fringe, trying to hide what was happening. But the itch spread, first to my eyelashes, then my hairline. Each pulled hair revealed another eye, another window into places I shouldn't be able to see. The visions became more intense, glimpses of other dimensions, creatures that existed just out of phase with our reality. One morning, I woke to find I'd pulled out all my hair in my sleep. My entire scalp was covered in tiny, blinking eyes. They showed me things that drove me to tear at my skin, desperate to unsee what I had seen. But each scratch only revealed more eyes underneath. The doctors diagnosed me with severe self-harm tendencies. They prescribed medications, recommended therapy, suggested support groups. How could I explain that the eyes were real? That they were showing me truths about our world, truths that no human was meant to see. Now I'm in a facility where they keep my hands restrained at night. The staff think they're protecting me from myself, but they don't understand. The eyes are protecting themselves. They're growing stronger, multiplying. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I can barely recognize my face beneath all the watching. The worst part isn't the pulling anymore, or even the constant watching. It's knowing what the eyes are waiting for. They're building something, a network of vision that spans dimensions. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I think I understand their true purpose. They're not just watching our world. They're looking for a way to let something in. Last night, I heard them counting down in their static language. I don't know what they're counting down to, but I know this. When you feel that first itch, that first compulsion to pull, don't. Because once the eyes begin to open, they never close again. And they're always hungry for more. Some childhood memories aren't just stories. They're scars we carry with us. When terror becomes so real it leaves physical marks, we're forced to question what's more frightening, the entities that haunted us, or the fact that no one believed us when we tried to tell them. In a large double-storied house with my parents, 4 sisters, and brother. 2 of my eldest sisters were actually my half-sisters, my father's daughters from his previous marriage before he married my mother. Being the second youngest in such a large family meant there was never a quiet moment, even before the haunting began. Screaming started when I was very young, perhaps around 4 years old. At first, my family dismissed it as normal childhood nightmares or inability to express discomfort. But I knew different. I saw faces peering at me in the darkness, heard footsteps around the house when everyone was asleep. This wasn't sleep paralysis. I could move, and oh, how I could scream. My family called them blood-curdling screams, though I never knew exactly how I sounded. By age 6, I stopped telling my family what I saw and heard. I tried to control my screaming, but sometimes the terror was too overwhelming to contain. My family, especially my mother, never punished me for these outbursts, but neither did they believe me. It was particularly embarrassing when we had guests staying over, as we often did, living near the seaside. Shame, you know? Dee gets very bad nightmares. They'd explain, and that would be the end of it. Sleep became my enemy. I would fight against it until exhaustion won, terrified of what I might see when darkness came. My father passed away when I was 8, and everything escalated. The entities became more defined, no longer just faces, but shapes. Spirits, in particular, appeared regularly. Gray-white forms, one taller than the other. I assumed they were a man and woman, though I couldn't really tell. When the poltergeist activity began, night after night, I'd hear crockery breaking in the kitchen downstairs, cutlery being thrown, furniture dragged across floors. But morning would reveal everything in perfect order. Not a single cup broken, every chair in its place. The terror manifested physically. I began pulling out my eyebrows compulsively. These weren't thin, barely noticeable brows. Mine were thick and dark, making the bloody patches and bald spots impossible to hide. I'd sit there, ripping at them while waiting for the nightly visitations to begin. It took my eldest sister's intervention during a holiday visit to break this habit, though she never believed what drove me to it. Once, I believe I saw my father's spirit. He tried to speak to me, his mouth moving without sound. Strangely, I wasn't afraid. My young mind even convinced itself he was speaking French, though I'm not sure he even knew the language despite his French heritage. The worst came when I was 11 or 12. Due to house guests, I had to sleep in my sister's room, the old master bedroom I always found unsettling. That night, as my sister slept soundly, I heard her bedside lamp cord tapping against the headboard. What came through the balcony door still haunts me. A creature, shorter than human height, but broad, covered in fur blacker than the darkness around it. Its red eyes gleamed as it approached my bed, its face almost snout-like, wearing what seemed to be a twisted smile. It stood there, staring, while I lay paralyzed with terror, unable even to breathe. Finally, it backed away, facing me the entire time until it disappeared onto the balcony. My scream that night was apparently the worst they'd ever heard. For the first and only time, my mother let me sleep in her bed. I think she finally began to accept that something wasn't normal about my experiences, though she never fully believed. The eyebrows grew back eventually, but the memories never faded. Sometimes, I wonder if the compulsive pulling was my way of trying to change how I looked, as if making myself different might make the entities stop noticing me. Perhaps it was simply the only way my young mind could cope with terrors that no one else would acknowledge. Some places hold more than memories. They hold warnings. When the songs of nature fall silent and familiar scents become harbingers, we learn that sometimes the most terrifying hauntings aren't the ones that arrive suddenly, but those that slowly reveal themselves, night after night. It began with the song of a lechuza, a small owl whose call pierced through the usual chorus of coquilles, the endemic frogs of Puerto Rico. Old superstitions whispered that such songs were omens, but I didn't know then how right they would prove to be. The first signs were subtle. The phantom scent of BBQ at midnight, when no neighbors were cooking. Later, I would learn that such unexplained odors often herald darker presences. Perhaps it was the room itself. I had switched with my sister's old room, leaving behind the safety of my childhood bedroom where nothing supernatural had ever occurred. The first entity revealed itself at 2 a.m., a shadow unlike any natural darkness. It moved across my dresser like a floating tumor, dreadlocks of darkness writhing in all directions. When it nearly reached my face, did I realize nothing could cast such a shadow. My startled reaction seemed to frighten it away, But this was only the beginning. Came the caressing entity. Night after night, I would wake at exactly the same time to feel dozens of phantom hands touching me from head to toe, persisting even when I removed blankets and turned off fans. While lying still, I witnessed my underwear being moved aside by an invisible finger, a moment that sent me leaping from the bed in terror. Its unwanted touches failed to provoke a response. It turned to violence, strangling me awake before resuming its nightly violations. I turned to reading the Bible, not from faith but desperation. Whether through divine intervention or simple boredom, the entity eventually departed. Months of relative peace followed, broken only by owl songs and phantom cooking smells. Then came the possessive entity, different, more aggressive. It tried to force its way into my body through my nose, as if seeking the quickest route to my brain. When I resisted, it demonstrated its power by moving my leg against my will. It revealed the truth one night. My reflection wasn't quite mine anymore. Something gleamed in those eyes, something that grinned with malicious anticipation. When I reached for the Bible again, the entity slapped it from my hands. In that moment, rage overcame fear. I swung the book like a weapon through the darkness, and somehow I struck true. Years passed before I left that room, that house, that island. The lechuza still sang, but the coquis grew louder. The BBQ scent lingered, but the entities never returned. They had learned, perhaps, that some prey fights back. I've never told my religious family these stories. They believe I share their faith, and some truths are better left unspoken. But here, in the safety of distance and time, I can finally share what happened in that room in Puerto Rico, where the song of an owl became the overture to a symphony of terror. Did these stories awaken something in your mind? Perhaps memories of your own unexplained encounters? We want to hear your story. Share your experience. Comment below with your own supernatural encounter. Join our community of storytellers at Unexplained Haunts. Subscribe to our newsletter for weekly terror tales. Remember, every shadow has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. Don't let your story remain untold. The night is waiting, and we're listening.